The search for Katy Ann. After my long journey to get my first real dog, Bruno, I decided to try my hand at breeding a few good working dogs. Bruno was larger than I usually preferred, but he was literally overflowing with the traits I loved. I had searched high and low for just the right puppy to use as the foundational mother for my line. While I generally preferred dogs bred strictly for their working tenacity, I didn't want to go through that difficult search all over again. I had done enough research to know I wanted to dabble in something that would produce healthier, hardier offspring, a concept known as hybrid vigor, without stepping outside the breed. I wanted to avoid typical crossbred dogs, even though they are very good at what they do. I briefly considered using some Staffordshire Terriers bred for their grit, but that would have delayed my long-term plans. And really, who in their early 20s is ever patient enough for an undertaking of that magnitude? Then, I heard about a breeding match made by a man in Houston. He had bred a highly regarded red-nosed female to a famous show-quality Staffordshire Terrier named Texas Jack. This sparked my interest because D.C. Humes, a man famous for producing great all-around dogs, was the mastermind behind it. He was a master breeder of his day, always eager to help people and do what was best for the dogs. He was also a humble man, free of wild claims or a big ego. I had never seen Texas Jack in person, but I had seen pictures and heard plenty of stories over the years, including one where he proved his bravery during an accidental fight in the kennel. Dawn, who got the first pick of that litter, offered to sell the female puppy to me. I decided to give her a try. She was delivered to my house by some folks passing through, which saved me the long drive to Houston. Love at first sight. Not only did I take an immediate liking to her, but for Bruno, it was undoubtedly love at first sight. There was only one name that fit this lanky, brindle-patterned female with a sparkle in her eye, Katy Ann. She grew like a weed. She learned all the standard dog tricks, but playing ball was her absolute favorite. When she was about 6 months old, I decided that professionally cropping her ears would add a sharp look to her appearance, so I reached out to Wendell Trussell to handle the procedure. He was as skilled as most veterinarians and could cut the ears in any style, from a short working crop to a longer show style. We brought her over to Trussell's place to get it done. With his surgical clamp and razor, the procedure took about a minute. I had no idea there was so much blood in a dog's ears. My best friend, Richard Massey, was with me that day and was entirely convinced Katy Ann wouldn't make it, but Trussell assured us she was in great shape. He told us to take her home and keep her quiet, and she would be just fine. By the time we got home, Richard, myself, and my Chevelle were completely peppered with blood. We pampered Katy Ann for a few days, which she absolutely loved, and then it was back to her normal routine. A surprise delivery. Katy Ann developed into a solid, 45-pound dog by the time she had her first mating season, and she was bred to her favorite bulldog, Bruno. As her due date approached, her girlish figure vanished, replaced by a waddle that made everyone laugh. Bruno would try to play with her, but she would just get up and move to a cooler part of the yard. A puzzled expression would cross his face as she coolly ignored him and maneuvered her way into the shade. 3 days before giving birth, she started showing signs that the puppies were coming. One Sunday evening after church, my girlfriend Charlotte and my friend Rick came home with me to check on her. By the back door, I had a 35-gallon barrel that served as a doghouse for my other dog, Snoopy. We searched everywhere for Katy. Rick suggested she might be in Snoopy's house. I kept looking in all her usual hiding spots. Soon, Charlotte was also convinced Katy was in the barrel, noting that it sounded like she was nursing a puppy. I patiently explained to them that Katy hadn't been able to fit into that barrel since she was 2 months old. But, just to humor them, I grabbed a flashlight to show them an empty barrel. Lo and behold, I shined the light inside, and the barrel was full of one bulldog and one newborn puppy. I had to pry the lid off the barrel just to gently extract her and move her into the proper birthing box I had built for her. The working litter. During the night, she delivered a whole bunch of puppies in every imaginable color. Bruno was incredibly proud of his kids. He would inspect them at every opportunity and occasionally try to court Katy Ann, but she quickly put him in his place. The pups grew, earning names that fit their distinct personalities, and what a remarkable litter they turned out to be. They were never intended to be anything but farm and working dogs, but they carried themselves as if they were top-tier combat dogs. My personal favorite was Blackjack, a black brindle pup who later became known as Terry and Hammonds Macho. There was also a uniquely patterned pup we called Tiger, and a tan-colored male named Bad News. To prevent them from playfully hurting each other, we separated them onto their own tie-outs early on. By the time they were 4 months old, we could let them off their chains to romp around together. One day, I was given a leftover turkey carcass. I planned to let the pups play with it for a bit before giving the scraps to the cats. Instead, the big, lanky puppies decided to fight over it, and the whole group got in on the action. I snapped a few pictures of this nonsense before separating them again. Looking at them, I realized, probably for the first time, that the bulldogs weren't being malicious, they were just having fun doing what they were bred to do. Katy Ann didn't know what to make of it and would scold them for fighting, though it never did much good. It was an excellent litter, one I will always be proud of. Bobby Ackle from Louisiana bought 2 of the puppies, and he liked them so much that he came back and bought Katy Ann herself. She had always been a gentle, non-aggressive dog with me, and I never forced her to fight or test her grit. Bobby later told me that while she proved to be very determined, she didn't have much fighting talent. However, she produced some incredible puppies for him. Years after she passed away, Bobby told me she was one of his all-time favorites, living proof that you find the great ones where you least expect them. She mothered at least 3 champions, 1 grand champion, and many outstanding working dogs. Bad News turned out so well that he was eventually stolen. Tiger, who we all thought was the most talented, gave up during a match on a sweltering July day, but he went on to live with my good friend JD, who used him as a training dog. As for Blackjack, now called Macho, he went to live with my cousin, Ralph Terry, and was simply a beloved family pet until he was over a year old. Macho's return and legacy. When Macho was still a puppy on my property, he and Bruno would play fight for hours. When Bruno got tired, he would jump up onto the roof of his doghouse to rest. Macho, who was too small to follow him, would settle for climbing onto his own, much smaller house. The 2 dogs truly loved each other. So, when my cousin told me he was returning a fully grown Macho to me because the dog had started acting aggressively toward other animals on his farm, I braced myself for trouble. They arrived in the evening while it was still light, bringing Macho through the garage. Bruno sniffed him at the gate, and his tail instantly went crazy with joy. We let them run loose in the backyard until Bruno finally got tired and hopped onto his doghouse. Macho, now easily big enough to join him, instead found the nearest small doghouse and jumped onto it, exactly as he had done when he was just a puppy. Macho was only slightly bigger than his father. I could exercise them together, having them run alongside a bicycle, or practice their grip training on tires hanging from a tree. By the time Macho came back to me, I was heavily involved in matching dogs, so to me, he was a diamond in the rough. He wasn't the most naturally talented dog, but he was incredibly durable and had an unyielding will to keep going. He was a fantastic sparring partner to help train larger dogs, and he recovered from injuries faster than almost any dog I knew. He eventually won a 47-minute match against George's dog from Chicago, and he had several opponents forfeit before finally winning against Otto's cream dog. Around that time, Terry Flory wanted to breed some dogs to catch wild livestock, so we bred his female, Susan Renee, to Macho. They produced a legendary litter that made Terry famous in the catch dog world and produced several formidable competition dogs as well. Later, Macho was bred to my female, Taffy. Together, they produced Massey's Bridget, who won several informal matches, and Mac the Knife, who defeated several highly regarded dogs along the way. Before I could match Macho in another competition, my cousin Ralph moved to Coleman, Texas. Macho went with him to serve as a guard dog and farm companion. A bittersweet farewell. As Macho grew older, he lost nearly all of his eyesight. Ralph, knowing Macho was an old rattlesnake killer, was terrified the dog would get bitten if he couldn't see the snakes coming. So, Ralph sent him back to me to live out his days as a breeding stud, figuring a dog doesn't need to see to breed. Unfortunately, his fertility was gone, and he didn't produce any more puppies. At the time, I hadn't seen a copperhead snake on my property in years. Copperheads are the smallest of the Texas pit vipers, beautifully camouflaged so perfectly that they are invisible in fallen oak leaves. Life has a cruel sense of irony. Macho was sent back to my farm to avoid rattlesnakes, only to fall victim to a copperhead. The snake's venom ravaged Macho's entire body. His lymph nodes swelled to the size of golf balls, and despite all our medical efforts, we couldn't flush the poison from his system. A week passed, and the vet told me he wouldn't last another day. That evening, I sat down with him. I gave him a gentle petting and rubbed down his feverish body. I thought to myself, you just refuse to give up, don't you? I told him how proud we all were of him. Looking back at me, he had a sparkle in his eyes that told me he understood everything I was saying. That look told me he had finally had enough, and that I shouldn't be sad, because he had lived a long, happy life full of adventure. As I buried that great dog, I thought of all the critics who had looked down their noses at him because of his mixed show dog bloodlines. I remembered the words of Anderson, one of the most respected dog men of the era, who once said, "I'd gladly feed a whole yard full of dogs as good as him, or the ones he produced." To this day, I still celebrate his life and everything it taught me.